Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, July the 21st, 2023. One of my commenters, Amanda Roberts 5111, asked that I look at the horoscope of Bill Gates. I haven't looked at Bill Gates's horoscope before, and I thought now would be a good opportunity to do it. I think one of the questions one is asking when looking at Bill Gates's chart is, if one was an astrologer in the mid-1950s and one was shown Bill Gates's chart, newborn Bill Gates, I think he was born October the 28th, 1955. So you're shown the chart of Bill Gates. Would you have said that he was going to be, at one stage, I think, the richest man in the world? Would his chart have actually shown this? Or can't we tell that kind of thing from a horoscope? Or perhaps we have to look at other factors. Obviously, Bill Gates came from a well-off family. That certainly helped. He didn't come from the gutter by any means. So maybe that's what it's about. Maybe it's just random. I read this book once called Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb. And Nassim Taleb talked about successful traders, people who on Wall Street and so on, people who are looking after billions of dollars, and he was suggesting that it may be just random. So you've got a new trader. He or she has a successful year by chance. If you pick random stocks, random trading positions, you've always got a chance of being successful. Maybe in that first year there might be a high dropout rate. Those who are unsuccessful will get fired, but there are always by chance going to be a few survivors. And if you can survive for a couple of years, again, statistically, you're always going to have a few survivors after a few years. Then there will be this illusion that someone is talented, because they just got lucky for a few years, and then they're put in charge of billions of dollars, and then it's only then one day they will of course lose it all, perhaps. But so with Bill Gates, is it just something random? Well, Bill Gates clearly is a very intelligent man. At school, he was extremely intelligent. At school, he got into computers early, and he was in the right place at the right time. And can we see the fact that he was at the right place at the right time, regardless of any talent he might have had? So we'll be looking at that a bit later. I'll also be looking at the chart of Melinda Gates, and seeing perhaps what attracted him to Melinda Gates, and perhaps what went wrong with that relationship. So yeah, that is something I'll be looking at. But first, I want to look at the stars for today, which is Friday, July the 21st, 2023. So here are positions of the stars. I've set it for London this time. I mean, why not? I mean, I usually go for New York, but today I'm going for London. These are the positions of the stars for on July the 21st, 2023, at noon, set for Westminster, England. So yesterday we had a Mars-Saturn opposition, and I went on and on about it, thinking it's, suggesting how dangerous it might be. And you might be thinking, okay, the danger's past. Well, it's not entirely past. In astrology, we have this thing called an orb. An orb, an aspect is exact, but the orb is how off it can be. Is it exact? Is it 1 degree out, 2 degree out? And as it separates, as the orb gets bigger, as the opposition or any aspect dissipates, it loses its strength. And so it is true that the Mars-Saturn opposition is starting to lose its strength, but it's still very close, and matters are intensified by the fact that the moon is acting as a trigger. So if you look at this chart set for London, you can see that the moon is very close to Mars. It's within it's within 2 degrees of Mars, and there's moon opposition Mars. So what's happening is that the moon, by moving to the same place as the Mars-Saturn, is triggering it. Now, if you're in the UK, that's probably going to mean that by the time you get out of bed, the moon will have moved on. The exact aspects, let me just go through. These are UK time. So at 7:03 a.m. you've got moon opposition Saturn, and at 7:36 a.m. UK time you've got moon opposition Saturn. So if you're at all a late riser, you're probably going to avoid that. Well, of course, something bad could happen to you in bed. I suppose that's always possible. If you're in New York, it's different. It means that you're going to be feeling these aspects much later in the day. So, even more so if you're on the West Coast in California or Washington State. So be aware of this. Yesterday's Moon-Saturn opposition hasn't gone away, and the moon is triggering it. So there's plenty of scope for arguments, frustration. The moon is now in Virgo. That means that we could get obsessed with detail, or other people could get obsessed with detail. When you get obsessions with detail, people are very picky. They start criticizing us for tiny things, and then that gets out of control. Or we might get into a situation where something isn't perfect, we try to fix it, and in the process of fixing it, we make it worse, and it loses its perfection, and then we drive ourselves crazy. So be aware of that, because it can be problematic. And that's not the only thing going on today. I split my forecasts up into day by day. I say Friday is going to be like this, Saturday is going to be like this, but it's not like you have a nice neat split between Friday and Saturday. That's why I do the I Ching, because I want to try and the I Ching. Why I do that? Because I want to try and create a unified forecast for each day. But with astrology, things are, you've got these waves moving in and out, and things don't just disappear as one day moves to another. And so what we have is arguably a grand cross forming. So what a grand cross is where you've got the Sun opposition Pluto, and then you've got the North Node and the South Node making a square to the opposite. So you can see you've got an opposition here, you've got an opposition here, and the Sun is about to make this opposition to Pluto. And okay, our opposition to Pluto, although it is exact tomorrow, Saturday, we can still feel it. It's still really very strong. And Sun opposition Pluto, it depends who we are. It can be an obsession with power. It may be a time when we really want to assert ourselves and establish who we are, and maybe we want to play power games. That's one aspect of Sun opposition Pluto. Another aspect is something quite different. Some of us, perhaps if we're of a more introspective nature, we might want to hide under a rock. Pluto wants to hide sometimes. And so we might find the whole thing really, really heavy, the whole situation heavy. Remembering that Pluto is starting to, aspect the north nodes, and the Pluto node can be about the destiny, according to Reinhold Ebertin, is about the destiny of a larger group of people. And I think he actually says something like, if it's really bad, it can be about a tragic destiny. I'm not saying that, but the sun is about to trigger that, and it's going to be happening. It's starting to happen today. It's exact tomorrow. The moon is going to if you look at the moon in this chart, so there's the moon. I've set this. I haven't. I've set these are the normal Placidus cusp. I haven't. I've assumed it, that there are house cusps on this, but I mean, don't worry too much about the house cusps. The moon is at 8 degrees 46 Virgo, so when the moon gets to the midpoint of the sun and the node, that's when the moon will start to trigger this Grand Cross. So London time, the triggering happens at 10:20 p.m. tonight. If you're in the California, that'll be 8 hours earlier. 2:20 p.m. So certainly, particularly if we're in the US, we may actually feel this Grand Cross, Sun opposition Pluto hitting the nodes and all that intensity. We might really feel it today. Today might be the maximum. If you're in UK, Western Europe, it's not going to hit you perhaps until late in the evening. So that's another thing to consider. So overall, I actually think it could be quite a heavy day, but there is a silver lining, and you can see that the moon at 8 Virgo is starting to make a trine to Jupiter. That trine is exact in London at 7:30 p.m. So that would be 11:30 a.m. in California, or 2:30 in the afternoon in 2:30 in the afternoon in New York. And so moon trine Jupiter, I think, is protective. So if we're worried about the world and its chaos, the moon trine Jupiter provides us with a certain amount of protection. And generally, as the day progresses, we're going to feel more of the Jupiter, less of the Mars and Saturn. And I think there's going to be scope for being happy and being relaxed. But notice that the Jupiter's in Taurus, Moon is in Virgo. It's in Earth signs. So ideally, we should use this Moon Jupiter trine in a more sort of low profile kind of way. Just relaxing with friends, doing something we enjoy, not taking risks, just being quietly comfortable. Doing perhaps routine tasks which are not necessarily boring, but are sort of comforting. Whatever you enjoy doing. I was going to say mowing the lawn, but of course, mowing a lawn can actually be dangerous, can't it? You mow your foot, and that's a real problem. Mars-Saturn, I suppose you could fit getting your toes cut off by a lawnmower. That would fit. So just do something relaxing and non-dangerous with that moon trine Jupiter, and the day can end on quite a good note. Now, as far as my forecasts for today are concerned, I've got them here. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Friday, July the 21st, 2023. Aries, things are hard work today, and the smallest of gains are likely to require huge amounts of effort, and a problem that you thought was over might come back into focus. But if you extend your time frames, the situation isn't so bad. There are behind-the-scenes forces that could slowly but surely improve your financial situation. Taurus, a lot of people are having a bad day, and you're probably one of the lucky ones. The moon is making a fortunate aspect to Jupiter, and your creative efforts will be noticed and appreciated. There is then the possibility that you're at the receiving end of a person's or an organization's generosity. Gemini, it's going to be okay, provided you adopt the right strategy. Your strength is geolocated, meaning that in some places you're stronger than in other places. And right now you're strongest in your own home or where you're surrounded by friends and family. Despite the temptations, career and business should probably be put on the back burner. Cancer. On the face of it, a difficult day, because the moon, your ruler, is making an opposition aspect to Saturn and a conjunction to Mars. There are moments of frustration, but as the day progresses, the situation improves. It's because of an easygoing aspect between the moon and Jupiter, which improves your luck and also your popularity rating. Enjoy it. Leo, there's a feeling of growing intensity as the sun, your ruler, moves towards an opposition aspect with Pluto. There are things you want to hide, but you also want emotional control. It's a struggle, and in the first instance, you should be looking for ways to ground yourself, focusing on what you can touch as well as what you can feel. Virgo, the moon is in your star sign, which is nice. However, it aspects Mars and Saturn, so it may be difficult to relax and everyday details might get you down. Yet, as the day progresses, the pressure starts to ease, and at a certain stage you'll be able to rise above the pettiness and start seeing an optimistic vision of the wider future. Libra, it's not really your kind of day. There is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, and people will find it difficult to be honest about their true feelings, and that includes you. And if you're involved in a relationship, your partner might be hard work. In your career, though, you're very perceptive, and you might notice something important. Scorpio, we live in a world where we are supposed to tell everyone how wonderful they are, even if they are being idiots. And with the moon aspecting Mars and Saturn, this annoys you, because some people really are idiots, and Scorpios don't suffer fools gladly. However, one friendship can make everything worthwhile. Sagittarius, today it will take some time to find your feet, and matters won't be helped by some people's attitude and behaviour. However, the moon is making a favourable aspect to Jupiter, your ruling planet, and this means that your hard work will eventually get rewarded. In general, try to understand rather than condemn. Capricorn, you have a definite impact on the world around you, and you can't be everyone's best friend. In some quarters, you'll be liked and respected. In other quarters, your attempts to make an impact could hit a brick wall. Indeed, it may become clear that you and someone else have very serious differences. But surely differences of opinion are the spice of life. Aquarius, what makes the difference between success and failure is your sense of grounding. The wider situation may be touch and go, but because you're anchored, you'll be able to weather the storm, and that storm may have a lot to do with the questions you ask, and sometimes the truth can be difficult to deal with. Pisces, the moon is moving through Virgo, your opposite sign. In an ideal world, you'll be focusing on relationships, but right now that might not be such a good idea. You're just not in the mood for doing things just to make people feel happy, and you're quite prepared to be critical. But a Moon-Jupiter aspect allows you to resolve things in a clean, clear, and almost magical way. So that's the astrology for today, and I am now going to move on to the I Ching. So, as usual, I threw the 3 coins in the air. I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? So, the first hexagram I got was the Wanderer, 56. It is not really a particularly good hexagram. It's about a certain lack of stability because, we're a wanderer. For some reason today, we're not entirely comfortable with where we are. We're dealing with things which are outside our comfort zone. And as a result, we are vulnerable. I mean, okay, we might literally be a wanderer. We might go somewhere we've never been before. But however we do it, there could be problems. One of the lines moves, this line here, the third line moves, and this suggests that we have to be on best behavior, because if we're in a situation that we're not entirely comfortable with, or if we're with people that we don't really understand, if we're like a stranger, and if we move too quickly and we try to establish our identity very quickly, we might just alienate ourselves because we're not on secure ground. We're not on our ground. And so we do have to be very careful. And we also have to be on guard. For some reason, we're vulnerable today. I don't necessarily mean that literally vulnerable, but, if we're out in the world, we can be out in the world and be still at home if we're making, for example, phone calls or having Zoom conversations with strangers or whatever. We're vulnerable and we could be perhaps verbally attacked, undermined, that kind of thing. I suppose, maybe it could be about, being lured by salespeople on the phone into an area we don't understand. And at that point, if we're not careful, we could lose everything. So we do have to be careful, and we need to assume we need to kind of assume the worst. And this last line moves. This last line is really quite difficult because it indicates that we could just lose everything. It talks about a nest burning up. So we think we've created security for ourselves. We've built this nest, but we haven't been careful enough. So because we are a wanderer, we haven't been able to completely establish a position for ourselves. And yeah, that makes us vulnerable. So overall, really difficult. And the wanderer moves. These unbroken lines, they all break. And this moves to hexagram number 2, the receptive. Interesting, we had this yesterday, the receptive. And so I would kind of say the same thing. It's not a time for taking the initiative. It's not a time for being wildly creative. We have to understand the situation we're in. We have to observe. We have to respond. It's not for us to take the initiative. Let other people take the initiative, and then we can start to evaluate the situation. And it's interesting that we've had the receptive 2 days in a row. With this Mars-Saturn opposition, it's suggesting that we're in slightly dangerous times. And if those that take the initiative, those that sort of plunge in, may be taking a huge risk, and we don't need to get involved with that. We can just watch, wait, and see how it pans out. So that's all I'm going to say about the I Ching. So we're going to go back to the astrology and look at the horoscope of Bill Gates. So Bill Gates was born on October the 28th, 1955 at 10 p.m. in Seattle. So what stands out about this horoscope? Imagining that we're an astrologer in 1955, we've got this chart, newborn baby. Are we going to predict great success? Okay, first thing that strikes me is the fact that there's no Earth in the chart. I kind of like to look at the elements first. So no Earth. On the surface, if you take a sort of a trivial view of Earth, you might say, oh, well, they're not very materialistic or something like that. But really having no Earth means that perhaps, if you're involved in something like computing and whatever, it's kind of all digital. It's kind of divorced from reality in a sense. It's a whole new world, and so perhaps it's quite good not to have any Earth if you want to be a pioneer in the world of computing, because you're attracted to things that are perhaps not fully of this Earth. All the action taking place at a digital level. Also, a lot of people with no Earth do have a compensation aspect to their character. Donald Trump has pretty much no Earth in his chart. Certainly no traditional planets in Earth signs. And money is very important to him. And with Bill Gates, okay, we hear about his philanthropy and his ideas about giving all or most of his money away by the time he dies. But still, I think there's a tension there. I think on one hand he wants to raise money, he wants to materially benefit from what he's doing. On the other hand, having no Earth, perhaps that helps him understand that, as they say, we're born with nothing and we die with nothing, and that's the case perhaps for all of us, or rather, we're born naked and we die naked. Sorry, that's a better way of putting it. Or do we die naked? But we die with nothing, and maybe that's something going on there. Now, as far as great success is concerned, well, the thing that strikes me, that has to strike anyone, is he's got moon on the midheaven. Does the moon on the midheaven represent in itself massive success? I'm not sure if it does. And if he had sort of, Saturn in Capricorn on the midheaven, perhaps, or Mars in Capricorn in its exaltation on the midheaven, but moon, not in itself, but it does suggest the public. The moon is the public. The moon on the midheaven does suggest someone who has a lot to do with the public. So that may be one aspect of his moon on the midheaven. As far as computers, yes, he's got Uranus. You notice that Uranus has just gone into Leo in the mid-50s, and he's got Uranus in the first house. Now, there's maybe a bit of a debate about that. Now, if you're into whole sign houses, you'd actually regard that Uranus as being in the second house. Now, you could say that fits because, making money out of computers, Uranus in the second, that fits. Although I think most people would regard that Uranus as being in the first house if you're using a Placidus house system. So, having Uranus in the first house, again, it fits someone who is involved in computers. And notice how the moon and Uranus are sort of making a trine aspect. It's quite a wide trine aspect, but having the moon on the midheaven trine Uranus in the first house, again, that fits. A lot of people have it. I don't think that in itself makes you the richest person in the world. One might also want to look at his Mercury. Clearly Bill Gates is very intelligent. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, he likes sort of academic intellectual pursuits. He's a big reader. He has his reading list, doesn't he, every year? He's a bridge player, and you can see that he's got Mercury in Libra. Mercury in Libra is quite a nice place for the Mercury to be in. Mercury's in an air sign, and it's a nighttime chart. So in a nighttime chart, Mercury will rule the air triplicity, Gemini, Aquarius, Libra. So that certainly gives his Mercury some strength. Jupiter is in this. Jupiter conjunct Pluto is, I think, really quite important, that Jupiter conjunct Pluto. It's quite close to Regulus, the royal star. Regulus, the royal star, that is about success. It's about meeting important people, being able to network with important people. And so Jupiter and Pluto, if you've got a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, that means you are frantic to be successful. You're able to put huge amounts of effort into being successful. You want to go the extra mile. Because of that Pluto. Jupiter is perhaps a bit lazy, but Pluto says no, there are things to do, and it's on Regulus. So I think that's certainly gonna help. But I would argue that there's nothing in this chart that tells us that Bill Gates is going to be like the richest man in the world. It doesn't strike me like that. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, there is another side to his horoscope, the darker side to his horoscope, shown by this Venus-Saturn conjunction. Now, Donald Trump has a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Cancer. Venus is a planet of relationships. And it's in Scorpio. Venus doesn't really work very well in Scorpio. In a male chart, Venus in Scorpio can be a bit, can be a little nasty sometimes. Can perhaps be maybe not always treat women in the best way. That's possible. Venus in Scorpio. The fact that he's split with his former wife Melinda Gates, and that she was making, I think she was uncomfortable with that, about an association he was supposed to have with Jeffrey Epstein, and we had all of this, and there were all these rumors about his links with a Russian bridge player, Mila Antonova. And maybe the Venus Saturn is hinting at a dark side to Bill Gates's life that I think we're probably starting to see it now, because recently he's, having been a sort of a hero over the last few years, there's been a lot of negativity. Of course, that negativity has also come from a libertarian right. For example, his enthusiasm for vaccinations and all of that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, that Venus-Saturn is not good. It's not a great conjunction. I mean, it gives him a toughness, perhaps, but maybe some people are aware of that Venus-Saturn. Maybe Melinda Gates, his former wife Melinda, would be able to tell us more about that Venus-Saturn conjunction, which raises the question of how does he relate to Melinda, or how did he relate to Melinda? Well, in terms of Melinda, one thing we need to notice about this chart, which I think is really important, and it kind of links with the Venus-Saturn conjunction, is this opposition between the Moon and Mars. It's a very strong opposition, and I should say he's got Mars on the IC, and when I see Mars on the IC, that might indicate sort of domestic turmoil. Obviously, that hasn't really happened to him. I mean, maybe when you're that rich, you don't have to worry about it. But there was a temptation, a tendency for that to happen. But as as far as I know, he had his relationship with Melinda. He had 3 children. His domestic life, as far as I know, was okay. But Mars on the IC does threaten to disrupt. And then you've got Moon opposition Mars. And now that might be telling us about the kind of woman he's attracting. Guido Bonatus was a sort of medieval astrologer. And he said about Moon-Mars contacts, he said something like, the woman is always right, I will warrant. And so what he's saying is, if you have a Moon-Mars contact in a horary chart about asking a question, or perhaps in a natal chart, don't cross the woman. The woman, she's right. Just remember that, because if you cross her, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble. And so this might suggest that he would be attracted to quite a strong-minded woman, a woman he might have a lot of arguments with. Hence the moon opposition Mars. And remember, the moon in Western astrology, most Western astrologers regard the 10th house as being the mother. So that suggests quite a strong mother. But opposition Mars, I mean, I don't know how Bill Gates got on with his mother, but we have some hints about how he got on with Melinda. So I just wanted to look at Melinda Gates' chart. Now, I don't think we have a time of birth for Melinda Gates. So here is her chart. I've gone for August the 15th, 1964. I set it for noon. I think she was born in Dallas, Texas. So she's got a Venus-Mars conjunction in Cancer. That's usually, it's about sexuality. She's going to have a sexual attractiveness in some areas for some men. Does Bill Gates pick up on that? We'll see. So that's her chart. She is a Leo. With Sun in Leo, perhaps a strong-minded woman, but a woman who's going to be attracted to someone who is kind of like Sun in Leo, like Bill Gates. I mean, Sun is very strong in Leo, so her perfect man would be someone powerful, like Bill Gates. And we don't know her moon sign. Noon, I have 29 Scorpio. So we don't know that. So the question is, how does her chart fit in with Bill Gates's chart? So let's compare the two charts. So inside we've got Bill Gates's chart. Outside we've got Melinda's chart. Now there is Bill Gates' Moon-Mars opposition. That's the kind of woman he's attracting. And then look at her Venus-Mars conjunction. Her Venus-Mars conjunction is square his moon, square his midheaven. Her Venus-Mars conjunction is square his Mars. Look, they've got Mars square Mars. And when two people have Mars square Mars, there might certainly be an attraction, but they could have arguments, they could fall out. And so I think what really tied these two charts is that Venus-Mars conjunction on his Moon-Mars opposition. Now, when I looked at past relationships, like for example, Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte Macron, the President of France and the First Lady of France, and I also looked at Charles and Camilla, I didn't really think that there was anything compulsive about the relationship, anything anything really tense and compulsive. In this chart between Bill and Melinda, I think there is. This is an example of a compulsive link. Her Venus-Mars hitting his Moon-Mars. I think that when he met her, I think she would have had a very big impact on him. I think, was that in the early 90s? I don't know. And I think that would have brought them together. But when you have this kind of link, it is unstable. And it might hint at the fact that they had a relatively long marriage until they split up. But in the end, it didn't work out. And I would have said that it was related to her Venus-Mars squaring his Moon-Mars opposition. Okay, one final chart I should look at. You know, the sort of the conspiracy theorists and so forth have been talking about Bill Gates's contacts with Bill Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and yeah, I mean, I suppose it might be useful to look at the relationship between Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein. So here we have it. Bill Gates is in the middle. Jeffrey Epstein, we don't have a time of birth for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, it's kind of interesting that they've both got their moons. We don't know the precise position of the moon for Jeffrey Epstein. So it's pretty much in the same place as Bill Gates, and that might have created some kind of connection. Notice also that Jeffrey Epstein's Saturn is at 27 Libra, quite close to Bill Gates's Neptune. Notice that Bill Gates' Neptune is actually square his ascendant. There is a Neptunian side to Bill Gates that, you know, obviously we don't see, or we haven't seen until perhaps recently. And so he might have sort of, at some level, maybe been attracted to the kind of sleaze that Jeffrey Epstein represented. And then Jeffrey Epstein's Saturn on his Neptune is kind of maybe being able to ground that sleaze, say, well, this is where it is. If you want it, it's here, or something like that. And we shouldn't forget that there's this story that Jeffrey Epstein tried to blackmail Bill Gates regarding his relationship, I think, with this Russian bridge player, Mila Antonova. Now, Mila Antonova, don't have a birth time. I think she was born in 1983. And if she was born I just took July the 1st, midday, at times during, I don't know when she was born in 1983, but July the 1st, 1983, if you took a midpoint, Saturn is around 27 Libra. So Mila Antonova actually perhaps has her Saturn in this kind of area. So quite close to Jeffrey Epstein's Saturn, quite close to Bill Gates's Neptune. But I mean, don't take that too seriously. I don't even know if she's born in 1983, but it's something to consider. So there are some links between Bill Gates's chart and Jeffrey Epstein's chart, but I haven't really gone into great detail about it. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the subject of Bill Gates, and I will talk to you tomorrow.